Tonight, we're in Halifax, a city damaged by Dorian. Picking up the pieces as much of the Maritimes remains in the dark. You ever see anything like this?
Not this big.
Also tonight, Trump cancels peace talks with the Taliban days before the 9/11 anniversary. On top of the tennis world, what's next for Bianca and Andreescu? And the NDP kicks off the campaign early, and we're ready for it. Our new political panel takes you inside the war room. This is The National.
This is Halifax, a city mostly in darkness after Dorian tore through, ripping massive trees, just like this one, from the ground, which then toppled power lines. We have extensive coverage tonight from across Atlantic Canada and right here in Nova Scotia. That is the province that took a direct hit from Dorian. Hundreds of thousands are without power right now. Many will be for days. So we'll show you how the crews are working hard to repair damage like this, the huge challenge they face, and how people are coming to terms with what happened.
The noise of the wind going through the trees.
The water came in pounding like crazy.
The surge that came in, it was just, you just couldn't stop. You can't stop it.
It's just like another world. I never seen it before.
This is a nightmare.
The nightmare was hurricane force, 145-kilometer winds raking across the Nova Scotia coast. The seas surging up the shoreline, buildings battered, and this roof, for instance, peeled off and just tossed onto cars dozens of meters away.
I remember walking out and going like, oh my God.
The storm touched land right near Halifax and then moved through Nova Scotia, roaring past PEI, eastern Quebec, and now Newfoundland and Labrador. It is Nova Scotia that saw the worst of it. Residents woke up to trees down, cell service pretty spotty, and no power to about 80% of the province. But Dorian appears to have spared the lives. That is a mercy for one of the worst storms to hit the Maritimes since the deadly Hurricane Juan in 2003. All right, so starting our coverage, Tom Murphy shows us how people in Halifax are coping the day after Dorian, daunted, maybe, not alone.
The buzz of saws, the hum of generators. After the roar of Dorian, this is what Nova Scotians awoke to. And on Halifax's tree-lined and now darkened streets, like on Elm Street, where some of those elms came crashing down, the realization is setting in. It will be a while before they get their electricity back.
I think we're probably one of the worst hit, at least in this area.
At the peak, more than 400,000 customers were without electricity, more than any other storm in this province's history, according to Nova Scotia Power. Extra crews from as far away as Ontario are now on the ground, but it will take days to restore power completely.
We are still in a very dangerous situation in some parts of the province. When there is a downed power line, do not take any chances at all.
In the city's downtown, this construction crane came crashing down during the storm. Now there's a stop work order on the site while officials try to figure out what went wrong.
What I can tell you is the Ministry of Labour has been contacted, and they are going to be looking into the details around how and why the crane itself collapsed.
There are no reports of serious injuries or deaths from the storm, but plenty of upset cell phone customers who wouldn't have been able to report a problem if there was one.
Service was spotty. This morning we woke up probably around 7:30 and we had like no service at all with Telus and Kudo.
Back on Elm Street, neighbors are making the best of a bad situation. They're finally getting to host their street party, postponed because of the hurricane. And now it's helping them empty their freezers of meat that would surely otherwise go bad.
The neighbors up there had mentioned that it was a good opportunity to get it out, so yeah, because otherwise the freezers were down.
And then tomorrow, they'll be back at the cleanup.
So Tom, you covered Hurricane Juan all those years ago, and I know this storm, Dorian, is dredging up a lot of the memories. Talk to us about the similarities.
Yeah, Hurricane Juan 16 years ago. The thinking on the street now, and you may have heard this today a little bit as well, is that Hurricane Juan may have done a little pruning, shall we say. which might explain why we have seen fewer trees down on the streets of Halifax tonight, although you and I have seen plenty of them and they've knocked enough power out to cause issues for a lot of people. The other big difference this time around was the level of preparation, I think. You know, from the emergency management officials to right through to the power company, the thought was that they had more people, more strategically located in different parts of the province to help cope with this. So the notion was that we were better prepared for this storm. Hopefully that will make things a little better in this province trying to get back to normal.
Just got to get through the next few days.
Let's hope, yep.
All right, Tom, thanks very much. So first sense of what Nova Scotia's infrastructure was up against. Take a look at this. This is Halifax Harbour yesterday. The boardwalk flush with the sea. The water testing the harbour's defenses to the limit. The power grid inland didn't withstand Dorian's test, and that is the biggest challenge facing the province tonight. Technicians are working to restore it, and they have some military backup.
You ready to go?
Yes, morning.
It was when Dorian was still on the way that the province asked for help, and immediately they answered. All told, 700 troops are deployed or are about to be throughout the Maritimes. These reservists are from the 36th Canadian Brigade Group. They are based in Halifax, so this is home they're helping. Given Dorian's ferocity, they were ready to deal with people trapped or stranded or flooded out. Halifax was spared those nightmares. The overwhelming issue now is power. And these are the weapons they need in this fight. Sounds like everyone did very well, though. I mean, we don't hear any reports of injuries.
I think we've been lucky. Maybe the storm has not been as strong as we expected, but still, I think there's a lot of damage that we've been told that EMO is tracking and Nova Scotia Power. So we're still stand by to react and to respond as needed.
And they are already needed. When we caught up with the crews on one South End street, they were still waiting for the military backup to clear this chaos. It's amazing, the root system that pulls up the sidewalks.
A lot of rock in Halifax,
Okay.
right? So a lot of tree systems are kind of big pans on top of the rock.
And for a city with a tree canopy as impressive as Halifax's, it's easy to see how most customers lost power. Crews have been working since daybreak, and Jason Cochran is the tired choreographer trying to get the right people in the right places. When you look at this, what do you see?
A mess. A tree that size, large elm tree, there's a lot of weight there.
It's hard enough getting to it all, even harder when the roads sometimes look like this. That is the lineup for Tim Hortons, and not the only one like it in Halifax today. Maybe funny from afar, not so amusing to emergency officials.
We can't clear the roads and open them until we can actually get to the roads, and 300 cars at a drive-through right now in different locations is really stopping our progress.
But they are exhausted here. They do need sleep and coffee, and they certainly need their phones charged. Power is everything here. For the moment, let's head outside of the city. South of Halifax, Dorian touched land here near Sambro and all up along the coast to Herring Cove. Communities were staggered by winds and swiped by the storm surge. Jamie Strachan saw the result firsthand.
In the community of Herring Cove, the fury of Dorian has subsided. The sun is shining. It's cleanup day. A powerful surge ripped Tom Rhino's boathouse from its moorings before it slowly sank. It's the most powerful storm Rhino has ever seen here.
Everyone's going on about Hurricane Juan, and is it worse? This was way worse.
The water came quickly and rose even faster. You can see the damage it did to this boathouse behind me and all along this shoreline. But to give you a sense of how high it rose, it came all the way up this hill here and came to a rest just in front of that blue storage shed. All along the coast, there's evidence of Dorian's anger. Wharfs severed, docks reduced to kindling.
It was almost like it was breathing. It was like up and down.
A few kilometers away in the community of Ketch Harbor, John Himmelman says the water just kept surging, wiping away a community wharf that had stood for more than a century.
We could fix it during one, but this one, like, it's gone.
The winds were equally as powerful, toppling numerous trees, including this one on John Greer's house.
It was just the soil. You could see it in slow motion. It was like, uh-oh, it's going.
Greer says the most important thing is that nobody was hurt. As for the property damage, he says people will rebuild and move forward. They've done it before. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Halifax.
Dorian's brute force was felt right across Atlantic Canada. That cleanup, again, likely to take days.
Holy mackerel. That was a hell of a wind there last night.
Across Prince Edward Island this morning, a rude awakening for many. Trees and power lines brought down by Dorian's fury. Roofs ripped off some homes. Even this oversized cow statue couldn't stand up to the storm.
Must have went about 50 yards down the road.
At their peak, the winds reached more than 120 kilometers an hour in the province, forcing the closure of the Confederation Bridge.
There's a tree on fire.
In New Brunswick, Dorian left a similar trail of destruction and tore apart this 43-year-old wharf, leaving it in ruins. It wasn't just the wind. This community east of Fredericton saw some extensive flooding. And this afternoon, Dorian blew right through western Newfoundland, damaging buildings, knocking out power again, winds approaching hurricane strength at times. Now, it's heading towards the North Atlantic. And so, of course, before it struck Atlantic Canada, Dorian hammered the Bahamas with a Category 5 ferocity. So tonight, the number of dead, we've learned, has risen to at least 44. And as Stephanie Mercier tells us, the urgency to get aid to the worst-hit areas is certainly growing.
Looking at what Dorian left behind, it's hard to believe anyone survived. Some areas, like Marsh Harbor, leveled.
Yeah, try to cut through here.
Officials say hundreds are still missing, likely buried under rubble or water.
Smell of death. A lot of death. It's bad. It's very bad.
Volunteers have come from the capital, Nassau, to do what they can to help survivors. 70,000 are in need of water, food, and shelter.
So you're helping people right here on the ground, right?
International help is coming through agencies like Canadian-based Global Medic.
We have one water filtration unit up and running, and within 10 minutes, we have a lineup of affected residents who require our help.
Even cruise ships are bringing in aid, some making thousands of meals to feed exhausted survivors, others taking more than 1,000 people to Florida.
The first thing what I did when I came on board was I got something cold to drink, some ice cold lemonade.
As others wait for flights to the capital, some are expressing anger at the way their government is handling the disaster.
I'm trying to tell you straight up, this right here, the way they treated us and the way they recovered, that's crazy.
Others worry about the massive recovery ahead, especially in the worst-hit region of Abaco.
I love Abaco so much. My dream is to rebuild Abaco.
The cleanup alone is likely to take years and billions of dollars. Stephanie Mercier, CBC News, Vancouver.
And back here in Halifax, obviously that cleanup will continue, but on a much, much smaller scale. A little later, we'll speak with the deputy mayor about what people here can expect tomorrow and in the days ahead. That's coming up.
All right, Adrian, thanks for that. Incredible pictures to see out of Nova Scotia tonight. We are starting, though, here in Toronto with politics. Every Sunday, the National will be your destination for the election. We'll take you inside party strategy. We'll break down the polls, and we'll tell you what to watch for in the week ahead. All we need now, an official campaign. By law, the Prime Minister has until next Sunday to trigger it. But make no mistake, candidates are ready. And as Olivia Stefanovic says, reports one party certainly isn't waiting.
The writ hasn't officially dropped, but that's not stopping the NDP from moving full speed ahead, becoming the first to launch their election campaign.
So this election is clear. It comes down to a very clear choice. Who can you count on to fight for you?
His party has struggled on several fronts, but leader Jagmeet Singh says he's ready.
Will you join us on this great journey to build an even better Canada? Then, my friends, let's get started. Thank you.
Even one of the Trudeau government's most prominent cabinet ministers isn't waiting for the starting bell. This weekend, Catherine McKenna revealed that she has faced such severe abuse for her stand on climate change. At times, she's required a security detail.
It's not going to stop me, but I think sometimes we do need to call it out.
Justin Trudeau is at it again, doing what he always does when somebody stands up to him.
The Conservatives aren't waiting for the writ to drop either. Ads like this have been running for weeks. This Conservative says delaying the official campaign works to Liberal advantage.
It's called the credit card campaign. He'll do a lot of pre-election spending, put it on the national credit card, and send people the bill after the election is over.
When the writ does finally drop, you may not notice the difference.
Good day, sir.
Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
And as this campaign ramps up, the race between the Conservatives and the Liberals is getting tighter. The latest aggregated data from our CBC poll tracker shows a virtual tie, both polling around 34%, NDP a little over 13%, and the Greens there just under 11%. So let's bring in our CBC poll analyst, Eric Grenier. He's in Ottawa, and he's going to join us every Sunday, so he tells me, throughout the campaign. Eric, can you break down a little bit those numbers that we're seeing there?
Yeah, well, it's really a neck-and-neck race between the Liberals and the Conservatives as we're just days away from waiting for that election to be called. If we had to look at it regionally, we'd probably say the Liberals are a bit more favored to win more seats with these kinds of numbers, so even in a tie, but it wouldn't take much to move them around. We have seen that the numbers have moved since the beginning of the summer. The Conservatives at the time, they were leading in the polls. They're now down about a point or two. Since then, the Liberals have picked up about 4 points, so we've seen the gap between the two parties shrink by about 5 points over the summer. For the New Democrats and the Greens, haven't really seen much movement. The only movement maybe that we have seen is further away from the two leading parties. Okay, obviously there's some areas of the country, perhaps more important than others. Give us a few that you're going to watch during the campaign. Well, three will be watching. The Greater Toronto area, of course, it's cliche to say that whoever wins there wins the election. Well, it's a cliche because it's true. Whoever does win the most seats in this region, which has more seats than most provinces, will probably form the next government. I'd also look at the Francophone ridings between Montreal and Quebec City. The Liberals, the Conservatives, and the Bloc Québécois are gunning for those seats. And if the Liberals or the Conservatives are able to make significant gains there, then they're probably going to be in a good position to form a majority government. Lastly, I'd also throw in Vancouver Island, because the Greens are looking to make some gains there to send a few more MPs to the House of Commons. But for the New Democrats, if things don't get a lot better, by the end of the night, and we're waiting for those results from Vancouver Island, it could decide whether the NDP gets to have official party status or not. Okay, Eric, thanks for being here, and we'll see you back here next week. So battlegrounds are taking shape, but the campaign won't officially start, of course, until the Prime Minister decides it should. And like everything in Ottawa, that decision is political. Salima Shivji looks at the impact of election timing.
So, Prime Minister, it's official now?
It's a power in the hands of the Prime Minister when to trigger an election campaign.
Of course I'm calling an election hoping to win.
That's why an election is necessary now.
The campaigns of the other parties, as near as I can tell, have already begun.
The last one, a marathon 78 days, prompted a change in the rules.
Campaigns have to be at least 36 days, but now can't be longer than 50 days. We're already in that 2-week stretch where the writ period can begin any day now, the latest day being September 15th, leaving some leeway for strategizing over when it's best to go.
Justin Trudeau may be a natural at this, even revel in it. But the conventional wisdom strategists say is the shorter the campaign, the better for a prime minister.
A long campaign tends to give you a longer time for something to sideswipe you, an issue to come out that you didn't expect, and that's never a good thing for a campaign and rarely for a government.
And launching early would put a stop to this.
It's great to be back in Victoria. $290 million over the next 8 years for housing here in Nunavut.
Funding announcements across the country. Trips on the taxpayers' dime, not the party's. Plus, the Liberals may want more distance from the damning ethics report on the SNC-Lavalin scandal before hitting the hustings, and more time to paint their opponent.
They can launch on the timing that they prefer and sort of get off on the right foot, as it were.
The war rooms are already up, the ads out.
Because it's time for you to get ahead.
I'm for moving forward.
That's my commitment to you.
There's a cap on how much parties can spend on these now, but once the campaign officially begins, the full war chests are available, up to $28 million. That's a problem for the NDP's rookie leader, who doesn't plan to use a plane for the early weeks. The party lags far behind not only in confirmed candidates, but more crucially, money.
I would prefer if there was more, because it gives you a little bit more latitude, but I have seen us do very well with very little.
The Tories, on the other hand, are flush.
The Conservatives have the money and you know, are kind of ready to go and primed. So you know, that you've already got this kind of pre-campaign period happening where they're doing election-style stops and so on.
The Liberals may hold the cards for the official campaign start, but it will look much like the last few months, only with a lot more scrutiny. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Ottawa.
So whenever the writ does drop, it will eventually, I'll be hosting a special live from Rideau Hall. At Issue will be there with me, and we will break down what you can expect from the campaign. And later this hour, we'll debut our new Sunday political panel, The War Room. 3 strategists from the 3 major parties will take us behind the strategy and the messaging. That's just a few minutes away. In Manitoba, a provincial election campaign is in its final days. That is Progressive Conservative leader Brian Pallister trying for a second mandate as premier. All of the major parties were on the move this weekend, hoping to persuade voters ahead of Election Day on Tuesday. Interest seems high for a late summer campaign. Nearly 113,000 people voted in advance polls. That's up by about 3%. Yeesh, a rough landing in Toronto for passengers on a Sunwing flight. One of the tires ruptured when it hit the tarmac. This video, shot by a passenger who says they were returning from Cancun, shows the moments after the plane touched down. Yeah, you can see the aircraft shaking. Police, though, say no one was injured. And Hong Kong protesters sang the U.S. national anthem today, directly imploring Donald Trump to intervene with Beijing and defend Hong Kong's constitution. The protesters have persisted, even though the legislation that they have been fighting against was finally withdrawn this week. Donald Trump was planning talks today on another world conflict, but he abruptly pulled the plug on meetings aimed at bringing peace to Afghanistan. As Kim Brunhuber tells us, Trump canceled after an attack by the Taliban.
Was this the moment a chance for peace died in Afghanistan? On Thursday, when a Taliban car bomb in Kabul killed 12 people, including 1 American soldier. According to Donald Trump, this attack derailed what could have been a historic first, separate U.S. meetings between representatives of the Afghan government and the Taliban today at Camp David. The plan for the secret meeting came about after months of negotiations.
Right there.
The U.S. had reportedly agreed to withdraw more than a third of its troops remaining in Afghanistan over the next 4.5 months, then eventually withdraw them all by the 2020 presidential election.
That when they return home,
that is, after all, what Trump had repeatedly promised. The Taliban, in exchange, would reduce, but not stop, its attacks, and it would agree to negotiate directly with the Afghan government. But on Saturday, Trump tweeted the meeting was off. Today, top U.S. officials say this is further proof Trump is always willing to walk away from a bad deal.
If it's not right, if it's not protecting the American people, if the conditions aren't appropriate on the ground and proper to protect America, we're not going to enter into any deal.
Afghan officials say they're happy Trump canceled. With the U.S. out of the way, they hope this will now lead to direct talks between them and the Taliban.
There could be risks to any process that the Afghan government is not the main stakeholder in that. And any process that cannot guarantee a ceasefire, a halt to the violence, could be harmful for all of the achievements that we've gained.
Now Trump is facing criticism at home from some Democrats who say he's approaching foreign policy like some kind of game show, and from some Republicans who say Trump shouldn't have even contemplated hosting the group that harbored Osama bin Laden, and certainly not a few days before September 11th. Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Washington.
Next on The National, our new political panel, The War Room. And later, Bianca Andreescu's whirlwind 24 hours from her U.S. Open win to the top of New York City. Plus, Adrian will be back from Halifax with more on Dorian's damage and how people are pulling together in its wake.
My name is David Hurley.
My name is Shakir Chambers.
My name is Michael Hay.
I formerly worked for Harper's Prime Minister's office and for the Ontario government on Doug Ford's election campaign.
I ran 2 national campaigns for the Liberal Party under the leadership of Paul Martin.
In 2017, I was Jagmeet Singh's leadership campaign director.
I'll draw on my experiences to help you understand the strategies and tactics that will help win over voters during the campaign.
I have a very strong understanding of what the public environments are that will drive this election campaign.
I know the leader, I know the party, and I know what's at stake in this election.
This election will be divisive.
And the last one for at least 2 of the major party leaders.
This election will be historic.
And welcome to the War Room. It's our new political panel. David Hurley, Shakir Chambers, and Michael Hay are going to join me every Sunday evening from now until election night to talk party strategies and what's happening inside the war rooms. Good to see you all. We're all very excited you agreed to do this. Yay. I want to start with how you feel your party's readiness is right now. It's coming. We'll talk about the timing of the writ dropping, but just in terms of where the parties are at, why don't you start, David? How ready do you think the Liberals are?
Well, I think that they're actually quite ready, as they should be, as all parties should be. This is a fixed election date, so it's not catching anybody by surprise. I think the Liberals are well on track to have a full slate of nominated candidates well in time. They have money, but not as much money as the Conservatives do. I think they look to me to be the most intellectually prepared of the Conservatives or the NDP.
You mean from like a policy perspective?
From like a policy perspective. It's clearest what they're about, and they've got the most out there. And they've got a team that worked in 2015 for them very, very well, almost all of whom are back in the jobs they had before. So I would expect them to run a great campaign.
Okay, how about you, Shakir? Where do you think the Conservatives are at?
I think the Conservatives are extremely ready. I mean, they have a full slate of candidates across the country. Yep. Their war room has been operating for a few months now. Ever since Andreescu got elected leader, they knew who their leadership team would be. Yep. That's allowed them to kind of organize local campaigns. That's allowed them to focus on the message and hone in on their messaging. That's also allowed them to do a lot of fundraising. The Conservatives have out-fundraised most opposition parties, even combined in numerous quarters, so they're ready to go. I know they released a statement, I think, a week or so ago that they've knocked on 4 million doors across Canada so far. So even with that, they've had a lot of opportunity to have one-on-one conversations with a lot of voters. So I think they're gearing to go, they're prepared to go, and they're really organized.
Michael, how about the NDP?
I think the NDP is ready to go too. They were the first one, and I think the only one to release a full platform. They released it in mid-June. It's about 110 pages, and everybody can go and check it out and see where they stand. And then last week, they had an exceptionally busy week, or this week that just passed for the leader. On Monday, we saw the release of 2 campaign videos, one in French and one in English, very different videos targeting different audiences. We also got to see the release of their campaign slogan, In It For You. And then throughout the week, unlike Mr. Trudeau, we actually saw a series of policy announcements. Almost every single day of the week, Jagmeet was making policy announcements. He held 2 town halls, one in Montreal, one in Toronto, and tonight they're rallying in Toronto, and they actually unveiled their campaign bus, which is a beautiful bus.
So that's an interesting point, that the NDP is already out there talking about different policy measures, the federal minimum wage, guaranteed minimum wage. I think there was a student loan thing too. I wonder about the strategy behind that. If you start announcing stuff before everyone's attention is focused on the election, is there a risk that no one's going to pay attention? At a certain point,
The no one is you, really.
Yeah.
Because one of the one of the awful things about election campaigns is you can't re-announce anything. So if the media think you've already announced it, even if nobody heard it, you can't re-announce it because it's old news as far as they're concerned. So stuff that they're putting out now, they will not be able to re-announce in the election campaign. You know, I think that they did have a flurry of activity last week, probably to try to change the subject from the fact that everybody was talking about how poorly prepared the NDP were for this election.
Lack of money, lack of nominations.
Right, and very few candidates and not a lot of money. They're admitting that they're really not going to be able to run a full campaign like the other parties are for the first time in a long time. So, I mean, I think the NDP probably are coming to grips with what the campaign's about for them, but organizationally they seem well behind.
Is that part of the strategy, you think, at least to reassure people a little bit that the NDP knows what it's doing, has ideas, is ready to do this? Was that part of all of what last week was, maybe?
No, I think that there was an understanding that Labor Day was the day that everybody was coming back. Right? The Tuesday after Labor Day, people were back to school, people were tuning in and starting to focus on the federal election. And so the NDP was ready and they got into that. And they will have a full slate of candidates in time for the election, in time for the deadline. And I'm actually incredibly proud of the process that the NDP has undertaken to nominate candidates. They have the most diverse slate of candidates of any of the parties. Right now, over 50% of the candidates nominated are women. According to the CBC, only 39% of the Liberals candidates are women, and unfortunately only 31% of the Conservatives candidates are women. They also have 15 Indigenous candidates running. One of them is Chief Turtle from Grassy Narrows.
Yeah. What about the Conservatives? I don't know if there's been a lot of policy talk. There was the series of speeches that Andrew Scheer gave sort of towards the end of the spring into the summer, 5 big speeches where he laid out some important viewpoints, but less probably over the summer. Is that strategic, that he's going to try and announce things once things really get going?
Yeah, I think ultimately he's going to be rolling out policies when people are paying attention.
Sure.
I don't think the average voter is actually focused on the general election. We know we have a fixed date, but I mean, we're inside the bubble. We care about these things right now. But I think when you start getting 2 or 3 weeks from E-Day, that's when folks are tuning in. That's when folks want to know what the leader's doing, what they're saying, where the parties stand.
Yeah.
I think as you get closer to that, you'll start seeing more announcements, more policies, and they'll obviously have a full platform before E-Day.
Let's talk about the writ timing, because obviously it's the Liberals' decision, the Prime Minister's decision. Like a handful of people know when this is actually going to happen. What is the advantage right now to delaying it? It's not really a delay. He can call it when he wants it, but to not have called it sooner.
I think the Liberals feel like they, after a pretty tough spring, have got themselves into a place where they've got the momentum. Polls are showing them tied or slightly ahead with momentum behind them. Some pretty good numbers in Ontario and Quebec showing up. So on balance, I think they're saying the shorter this thing is, the better, the fewer debates there are, the better, the faster we can get this thing over with, the better.
But he's good at that stuff. Like, that's the part I don't understand. He's a good campaigner. He's shown he's a pretty good debater. Why not leave him the time to demonstrate that?
Well, I think because leading campaigns are inherently risk averse. Right? And you want to minimize the exposure, any of those things. He's very good at those things, but any one of them could go badly at any point in time. And so why take that risk?
Do your leaders, do you think that they have a preference to how long it is? I mean, no one wants to see how long it was last time. That killed almost everybody. But do you think for Andrew Scheer, he needs more time? I was out door knocking with Stella Ambler a week ago, and she's well known, but some people still didn't know who Andrew Scheer was. So I wonder if there's an advantage for him to be out there for longer.
I think at the end of the day, the Conservative campaign is ready to go at any point. They have had Andrew Scheer across the country promoting his message, setting the tone, kind of saying what his vision is for this country. They can go at any point. I think for the Liberals, I think one of the biggest things for them is that when you start to throw the writ a little bit later, they have a lot of third-party support, third-party ad support. Obviously, when you get into the campaign, that gets cut down. There's a lot of restrictions on what you can and can't do. So it's to their benefit to have a shorter writ period and a longer pre-writ period to have those
although you guys
support.
have more money to spend
That's
during
true.
and after.
Right. But I think there's a lot of third-party advocacy groups that are doing a lot of things on behalf of the Liberals that are allowing them to get away with certain things, again, before the actual writ is dropped, right? So they have a benefit of that until the writ is dropped.
What about Jagmeet Singh? I would say the same sort of thing. Probably well-known in pockets of Canada, but not necessarily everywhere. Is there an advantage to him in having a shorter or longer campaign?
I don't think it actually matters because, as we saw this week, they started a full-on campaign. Yes. They have their campaign buses, they have their planes up in the sky, like they're ready to go. I think the real question is why the delay on the Liberals' part? Why is it that this last week we only saw Trudeau, or at least I only saw Trudeau at one event? It was a $400 a person fundraiser in Brampton, and then he's not showing up for the National Leaders Debate next week. It seems more like the Liberal strategy is to have the leader lay low and go into comfortable places, and as Hurley said, just get through the election.
Well, presumably he's governing too. I mean, he has a day job, I would imagine, as well. But let's do one quick round on these debate things, because I don't know that. I remember, last campaign, it was a big issue. I am not sure that people really care who's in a debate or who's not, or who shows up and who doesn't.
Well,
I know we all talk about it, but I don't know that anybody else cares.
You can't make an issue really out of the fact that people aren't in the debate, because you're right, people don't care that much about it. And so people make the parties make these decisions based on what their strategic objectives are. Last election, Mr. Harper did a lot of debates.
Yeah, it was a long campaign.
A long campaign, and he did 5 debates. Is that because he was a super transparent guy? No, it's because he thought he would crush Trudeau in those debates and that he would show that Trudeau was inferior to him. He thought those debates were in his favor, right? Mr. Trudeau feels like he's going to win this election if everything goes according to plan, and he doesn't need to use those debates to demonstrate any further leadership advantage. So it's not like the public's going to be upset about whether somebody participated or not.
Yeah,
it sounds like you're saying that Mr. Trudeau isn't sure that he will crush Mr. Scheer or Jagmeet Singh in those debates.
Well, you can never be sure about what will happen in those things. It's obviously in the interest of the people that are like Jagmeet Singh. It's obviously in his interest. Go in their debate, just take a lot of roundhouse punches and see if something lands. You don't have a lot to lose. Mr. Trudeau has a lot more to lose.
Ultimately, though, when you're talking about debates, this is a prime minister that had 4 years to govern on whatever he wanted to govern on. Now in these debates, he has to defend his record. And I think there's some holes in his record that he doesn't want to go out there on the stage to defend. I think someone like Scheer, who's going out there, it's just about respect for the electorate, right? If you are a voter, you want to see leaders on stage, you want to see this battle of ideas, and you want to see who puts forth the best vision for this country. I think it's probably best to have Trudeau on the stage debating all these candidates, as eager as he was in 2015, do the same thing in 2019.
Okay, I've only got a minute left. I just want to have one thought about what this week will bring. Like, other than possibly the writ dropping, which would make me very happy. One thing that you think it'll bring?
I think this week will bring increased pressure on Jagmeet Singh to be getting more organized and getting more candidates in place. I think we're going to hear more talk about that as the week rolls on.
How about you?
I think for the NDP, we'll see the announcement of up to 100 candidates over the course of the week. They'll hit 300.
Just confirming what you want to hear.
They'll hit 300 by the end of the week. And then we'll start to see a little bit about their campaign, like their ground campaign strategy, and likely, from my perspective, a focus on Ontario and British Columbia, which combined represent 50% of the seats.
I think this week, when the writ drops, you're going to see the Conservatives start to say to Trudeau that we can talk about what we want to do in the next 4 years, but this election, let's talk about what the record was in the previous 4 years and why you think you deserve to be reelected.
Okay, that was a good start, right? And like, we don't even have an election, and it's a good start.
I know, we've had something to talk about.
Yeah, and so we'll be back next Sunday. Thank you all. And in the lead up to Election Day, I'm going to be on the road a lot, visiting key battleground ridings. I've already started, but to help you better understand what's at stake. Starting tomorrow, I'll be in BC's Lower Mainland, where the Liberals' message of balancing the environment and the economy is being put to the test from the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
It's an interesting position to be in, right? To be one of 2 members of Parliament that voted against a project and voted against your government.
To the Green Party, hoping to make a breakthrough.
I think more and more people are voting with their conscience. They're voting for what they want.
Will climate change shape this campaign? The National live from Battleground, BC, starting tomorrow. So I'm right on an airplane tomorrow morning. And every Thursday, if you're not sick of me yet, I'll be in your podcast feeds with BuzzFeed's Elamine Abdel Mahmoud. So he's worth listening to. Our new CBC podcast, Party Lines, will go beyond the talking points to help you get election ready. Check that out too. Time for a quick break. Next, Adrian is back from Halifax, a city still dealing with Dorian's damage. We will be right back with a look at what the days ahead will look like there.
He just built a brand new wharf a few months ago in the shed, and that's all gone. That's in the water. My shed's in the water up further. And all those rocks there, they came from over there. Now they're all over here. You can see them going through the air at times, right?
When it hit near Halifax, the force of Dorian was strong enough to toss boulders onto the road and stuff the shattered remains of buildings into an inland pond. The focus now, obviously clearing debris and getting power restored. Both of those tasks could take days. Okay, so we're joined by one of the busiest people in Halifax. This is Tony Mancini. You're the deputy mayor. And I'm wondering if you can give us a sense of what Halifax can expect tomorrow.
So as normal as we can be after going through a hurricane. So tomorrow the schools are still going to be closed. The Premier have closed all the schools, though the universities will be open. Our transit is going to be returning tomorrow. The peninsula of Halifax, we're hoping most of the power will be back, so a lot of the businesses will be operating tomorrow. We are asking our residents to please, try to avoid taking their cars if they can downtown. Try to take transit if they're able to.
Okay, so Tony's had the benefit of being up in helicopter for a good part of today to get a sense. What struck you the most while you were up there?
You know, it's really amazing. Getting into the helicopter, I had that fear of what we had here in Halifax in 2003 was Hurricane Juan, and we saw the devastation. And so I was fearful of getting up in the air and looking down at our beautiful city and seeing that devastation. Fortunately, we didn't see that. For the most part, we're in pretty good shape. You know, we have the areas that we've identified already, just confirmed. You know, the south end of Halifax, the south end of Dartmouth, North Dartmouth, and some of our rural areas that really hit the hardest. So that was just going up in the chopper, just confirmed that.
You mentioned Juan. I know that, you know, very briefly, I know the city learned a lot of lessons. Can you give me a sense of what kind of lessons you learned that helped you this time?
Yeah, a big piece was communicating and getting together with our partners, you know, the province and all the other groups that work with us to deal with emergencies. But our equipment, you know, from a city point of view, we had all of our trucks ready. All of our equipment was tested, the chainsaws, our extra fuel, large tanks were all stored up. So we were ready to go, and we had planned for this since the Hurricane Juan, planned for these types of events. So we were much better prepared, and we were ready, and I was so proud of our crew and our team. They did an outstanding job.
Well, good for you. Sounds like you're very lucky. Tony, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So we've witnessed something else here to be very proud of, neighbors coming together to help each other out. We will be back with that in tonight's moment a little later.
But coming up next on The National, a champion celebration.
It's been pretty hectic.
Bianca Andreescu, fresh off making history at the U.S. Open. What's next for the 19-year-old phenom? Right after the break.
I'm Jamie Poisson, and tomorrow on CBC's daily news podcast, Front Burner, Bianca Andreescu is the first Canadian singles player ever to win a tennis Grand Slam. We'll talk about her historic win and what it means for the sport in Canada. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
The eyes of the sporting world are once again on Canada after Bianca Andreescu's incredible win at the U.S. Open. She, the North, took down one of the greatest of all time, Serena Williams. Greg Ross now on how Andreescu is coping with her sudden stardom.
Nearly 24 hours after becoming the first Canadian to win a Grand Slam singles title, and still Bianca Andreescu barely had time to breathe.
Well, it's been pretty hectic. I never really got the chance to just soak everything in yet, but hopefully I get the chance today.
First, this photo shoot at the top of the Rockefeller Center. More media than she's ever faced. So much has happened so quickly for the Canadian tennis star who just turned 19 earlier this summer.
This young lady has it all.
Many Canadians were only just discovering Bianca Andreescu, and now she's been thrust onto the world stage. Here she is on the cover of the New York Times. Her coach, Sylvain Bruneau, says he's doing his best to guide her through what comes next.
She's very grounded. She's very authentic, genuine. She's a little bit the girl next door, kind of. And we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that she stays who she is.
I really don't want to change, and I think I just have a really good support team around me. At the end of the day, I'm still human no matter what, and I have amazing parents and friends that just help me stay grounded.
And staying grounded will be important if she wants to continue doing this.
At the beginning of the year, I wanted to crack the top 100, but I guess I have to start setting my goals a bit higher. Let's say top 3 by the end of the year.
Andreescu says now she's looking forward to getting back to Canada. She says when all of the excitement from her U.S. Open victory dies down, she's going to take a little bit of a break to let it all sink in. At this point, though, she says she's not sure when she'll get back to training or when she'll be back on the court. Greg Ross, CBC News, New York.
She's just awesome. That's it. We'll be right back with tonight's moment. And tonight, it's a moment of generosity and gratitude. Dorian bringing out the best in people.
All right, welcome back to Halifax. We've had an audience here tonight, a lot of folks who are still without power here on Wellington Street. They still need to know the news, so they decided to come out and watch the National as it was happening. We wanted to bring them in because tonight's moment is all about the people here in Halifax helping each other out.
one of our volunteers, Allison, all credit to her. She recognized that there was an opportunity for us to open the oven for everyone in the community. I put the notice out on social media that we might be having a storm oven. I saw Bernie's post and knew that our store had no power. So I said, hey, let's gather all this stuff up. We'll take it up to the park oven. Basically, anybody who wants to make a pizza today, here, it's on us. At one point, there was probably 30 people in line. We were cooking 2 or 3 pizzas at a time in the oven, and at no point were people ever impatient or walked off. We've been through storms like this here in the Maritimes before. There's always that sense of a shared experience, and I think that shared experience is even better when it's shared over a hot pizza out of a wood-fired oven.
Absolutely even better when it's shared with food. Part of the conversation we've been having here is about emptying fridges and taking chicken over to the neighbors and helping each other out. This entire thing has been a shared experience. This tree behind me is a tree that a lot of people have watched grow for the last 20 years, and one woman was raising a glass to it earlier tonight. It means a lot, Rosie.
So Adrian, how are people feeling about whether they sort of got out a little better than they had thought? There were no deaths, and yes, there's been some disaster, but maybe they feel okay given the way things unfolded.
Yeah, I don't want to overstate it, but there's a little bit of giddiness that everybody's actually okay. It is nothing short of miraculous given the crane and the roof that fell off. I think people here did very well. That is the National for this Sunday night, September the 8th. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.